Good morning. Welcome to the August 15th meeting of the Palo Alto Architecture Review Board. Could we have a roll call, please?
Yes, good morning. My name is Jody Gerhardt, Manager of Current Planning. And roll call, we have Chair Balte.
Present.
Vice Chair Thompson.
Present.
Board Member Liu.
Present.
And Board Member Hirsch. Thank you, all present.
Next item on the agenda is oral communications. If any member of the public wishes to speak to any item not on our agenda, seeing no one. Next item is agenda changes, additions, and deletions. Staff, do we have anything to say? Nothing, okay. City official reports. Can we go over coming up projects to review, please?
Yes, so for the next hearing being September 5th, right now we just have one project that will be the at the shopping center, and it'll be the market area near Sagonas. And there'll be a few, it's the market area itself, it's also a few facades around there.
Yes, okay, thank you. And do we have any upcoming subcommittee items?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. Then we're going to move on to our first action item. That's item number 2. It's a public hearing for 788 San Antonio Avenue, consideration of a major architecture review to allow the demolition of existing 12,000 square feet of commercial space and the construction of a 4-story mixed-use building that includes 102 residential units and 1,780 square feet of commercial space. 16 of the residential units would be below market. The project also requires a zoning amendment to apply the Housing Initiative Program, the Housing Incentive Program at this location. Before we get started, I'd like to ask if anyone has any disclosures to make, starting with Alex.
Yes, I visited the site on Tuesday, and I've done additional research on 4 items. One is I looked into the zoning for the property next door in Mountain View, which is MM General Industrial, with 0 setbacks required. I also researched the new trees on San Antonio Road that were installed by the city in 2012. I looked into the vacant building next door on Leghorn, which seems to be vacant since about 2014. And then the last item was I did look at a project called the Parker in Berkeley, which has a what do we call it? Like a lounge lobby bicycle room, similar to what the applicant is proposing today. Just to see how I was looking to see how well it was actually functioning.
Perhaps during your comments you can bring us more information about that. Ozma?
I visited the site.
David?
Visited the site, walked the neighborhood.
Speaking to them.
Okay. Yes, visited the site.
I too visited the site and nothing else. Thank you. Okay, staff, do we have a report?
Yes, we do. Good morning. I'm Sheldon Ossing, project planner, and the applicant's also here with their presentation as well. So I'll just give an overview about the project and why we're here, a little bit of context as well, because there is a zoning amendment that is going on at the same time. But this is a formal review of development for a 4-story mixed-use building with about 1,800 square feet of commercial space at the corner of the building at Leghorn and San Antonio. They are proposing 102 dwelling units on a 1-acre site. And the request does include, in addition to the major architectural review, which is under the purview of the board, there is a zoning amendment, and I'll go into that in more detail. There's also a parking reduction request and a partial waiver of retail space. The city does have retail preservation, a certain amount of retail-like space that needs to go back onto the site after it's demolished. And the site that the project is proposing is something that's less than that. And since this project is really at the beginning, we need a lot of other components to come together. It also includes an environmental impact report. We're seeking no recommendation at this time, just to get some feedback on some items, and we'll get into that. A little bit of background: the existing zoning and comp plan designation for the site is service commercial, and that's consistent with the properties, the majority of properties along this corridor. As I mentioned, the site is just under an acre. And the uses on the site would be some, probably uses would be retail, wholesale, auto services. There's a martial arts studio there now, as well as a contractor's office. And existing buildings are about 18,000 square feet, and they're built in the 50s and 60s. So just a little bit of context here. This project is at the intersection of San Antonio and Leghorn. It's right on the border between Palo Alto and Mountain View. The rear of the property serves as that border. And as mentioned by Board Member Liu, that yes, the adjacent properties in Mountain View are industrial. You do have some single-story, some two-story buildings in the area. You have the greenhouse community, residential, multifamily neighborhood that's across the street from the project. And then just at Charleston and San Antonio, there's the kind of larger senior community building there in a complex. And then also along San Antonio, you have the hotels that are under construction right now that this board had just seen a couple years ago. So it is an area that's in transition. And looking at the zoning map here, again, this is the zoning areas, mostly CS. You do have some, the neighborhood, residential neighborhood is a PC designation. I put the 2 X's on the map. One is the project location as well as the hotel site that's under construction now, just for a little bit of context of larger buildings in the area. The hotel building has a 2.0 FAR also. So an overview about the project. Presently, it's a 102-unit residential mixed-use project for ownership units. The applicant could go into whether that's going to be the case in the future for ownership. It might be rental. There's a lot of studio, one-bedroom types of units. There are really a handful of 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom type of units, so it might lend itself more likely to be a rental project. The project does include an underground garage containing the parking. There's 93 spaces that are provided, 110 are required for the site. 42 of those are with the mechanical lifts, and the others are on the surface without any lifts. As mentioned, that is about 1,800 square feet of ground floor commercial space at the corner. So as presently proposed, the project doesn't meet the zoning. They have to go through a zoning amendment process, and the idea is to extend the housing incentive program to this area. And that is something that was recently implemented as part of the zoning amendments to El Camino Real in the downtown area. The project site is actually identified in the housing element as a housing opportunity site. There is a comprehensive plan policy to eliminate these housing opportunity sites along San Antonio and focus and concentrate on sites within the downtown El Camino Real. So this would be a little bit different, but we do have a willing applicant to come forward with a housing that has a really good amount of density to help out with the city's issue with residential. So the idea would be with this zoning amendment to include this housing incentive program, not only for the site, but on the corridor for CS properties between Charleston and Middlefield. And it would allow higher FAR for projects. Right now, the FAR is up to 1.5, but we're looking at up to 2.0 for this project. So as part of this housing incentive, does eliminate the maximum density and creates a waiver for lot coverage. It also would allow for any types of rooftop gardens. None is proposed in this project, I believe. There's a little bit of a covered rooftop garden. And they also exclude 1,500 square feet of retail-like floor area from parking requirements. So it helps out a little bit with the parking there. And as I mentioned, the highlighted green area there in the map would be kind of the areas that we would be considering including this housing incentive program. So in comparison of what's existing now and the housing ordinance and what's proposed, this matrix here, you see some of the things that we'd have to change with the zoning. The maximum combined FAR maximum is 1.5. This project's looking at about 2.0, so we'll be looking at something a little more intense. We did run this by the council through the pre-screening process last May, and they seem receptive to the project going forward, at least with the request. The maximum density under the CS zoning district is 30 units per acre, and this project is just over 102. The retail preservation, there's a partial replacement. There is already an existing exemption and waiver in the code. This would seek a modification of that. And then looking at the parking, the project would require an exemption because there is a reduction in the amount of parking spaces. And this is actually just the elevation of the under construction hotel project. Just to give a little bit of context there and what this board did there. There is a special setback along San Antonio, the same special setback that's in front of the subject property. And for this project, the board did want to see kind of a step back at the upper levels, have some terraces there with some landscaping. So that was important for the board. And this is the proposed San Antonio elevation for the project. And I'll let the applicant kind of describe sort of their design intent of what they're trying to do here, but I just wanted to provide this image for you early on. You do have that covered roof deck with some of those palm trees up there. And this is more of the Leghorn Street elevation. You can see the entrance to the parking garage as well as the retail space there at the corner to the left. This is the rear elevation. This is looking from the Mountain View properties. A lot of that there is with the brick and stucco facade. And this is, again, that corner elevation looking more at the retail plaza area and how that works with the pedestrian and the streetscape. I think we're going to ask the applicant to provide a better interior courtyard elevation just so we get an idea of what and how that open space works. I think we can do a better job there with that, but this is what was in the planning packet. And then we have the covered roof deck image there, and that shows kind of what that experience would look like from that level. And just to touch upon some of the affordability requirements, as presently proposed, if the project goes forward with ownership, then 15% of the amount that they're proposing is 16 affordable units. If they decide to change the project to rental, then they would be subject to a payment of a fee. And then with respect to the California Environmental Quality Act, the building at 7088 San Antonio is eligible for listing on the California Registry. That makes it deemed to be historic. And so therefore, the demolition of that structure constitutes a significant and unavoidable impact under CEQA, and that requires an environmental impact report. So that effort is ongoing right now, and we're starting to do some traffic counts, and we're going to the Planning Commission with the scoping meeting and notice of preparation. Thank you. There's so many acronyms these days, but notice of preparation to start that process. So in conclusion, we do have a series of questions because we're not expecting to have a recommendation of approval today, and we're really early on now. But just some observations that we made. There's large expanses of curtain walls, glass and glazing on the project. Does the project provide sufficient visual articulation along the street elevations? Is the retail space designed in a manner that will be successful? Are the open space areas designed to maximize their potential use? Are the floor to the ceiling heights appropriate? Are the windows sufficiently set back to provide relief? Is there sufficient connection with the streets? And there may be some other issues that the board have recognized in their evaluation of the materials. So in the next steps, we're at step 1 here with the ARB meeting number 1. We are going to the Planning Commission on September 11th. That'll also serve as the environmental scoping meeting. We'll discuss the zoning amendment concepts with them there. They're not going to have purview over the design of the building, but we'll at least explain to them what happened here at this meeting. And then we're anticipating a couple more ARB meetings. That's the maximum anyway that we could have. And there'll be a second Planning Commission meeting And then the public draft of the environmental impact report will be circulated for comment. And then finally, this will all culminate in everybody making a recommendation to the city council. So with that, we're asking the board to consider the proposed project and provide feedback on the project design to the staff and the applicant, and continue the item to a date uncertain. That completes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Sheldon, if you could, I think all of us might have some questions, but I believe this went to a preliminary hearing before the city council. Could you summarize how that went, please?
Yes. So we did go to the council. We had a smaller project. We had a project that has 64 dwelling units, and we proposed the idea of a larger project, more dwelling units, bringing the housing incentive program to that site, some of the waiver of the retail space. And there was sort of this dichotomy between retail and housing, as you would expect. But in the end, there was support to move the concept forward through the process, for including the housing incentive program there, having a project come back with a larger FAR, having more housing, but it do include the retail.
So I want to be clear that it's your opinion that the city council is in support of this type of large difference in zoning. I mean, it's a much bigger building than would normally be allowed. I'm not saying to you to tell me what they would say, but we're being asked to judge this based on a hypothetical zoning standard. We'd like to think that that's reasonably supported by the rest of the city.
Yeah, that is correct.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, David.
Sheldon, why are we seeing this prior to PTC? There seem to be a million different things that are questionable concerning the zoning. Wouldn't the city normally have gone to the PTC first and then come to us? Why is this on our agenda?
Yeah, I mean, we've been to the city council a couple occasions for the pre-screening. They seem to be, as I mentioned, supportive of the concept, as well as there's not an order in the zoning code that would say you have to go to the planning commission first. We're just thinking in terms of this is an opportunity for the board to provide some feedback on this design of the project.
So we're not looking at the zoning issues then, here in particular? We're just looking at the architectural issues. Is that the point?
Correct. The zoning is not in the purview of the ARB. And that's why we're asking you to, we believe the council to be, supportive of this concept. And so we're asking you to look at it from that perspective.
Well, I have to say, it seems to me that the process is upside down.
These are questions, David.
Yes. It's a question. I'm just making a statement regarding that, because I think that it would be nice to have a more generalized view of the zoning first.
Any other questions from my colleagues? Okay, do we have a presentation from our applicant? You will have 10 minutes to speak. If you could state and spell your name for the record, please.
Good morning, Board. My name's Ted O'Hanlon. Last name's O''Hanlon. I'm a project manager. I work closely with the owners. I'm going to do a very brief introduction and let our architect speak to the things that you guys are most considerate of. We acquired this property about 14 months ago. When we first saw it, its availability, we remarked its location on a principal arterial, being San Antonio Road. We thought that was particularly interesting. We liked its proximity to Highway 101. We also liked the fact that even though it is 1 mile, it is still a direct shot to the San Antonio Caltrain station. So we started to imagine it as a very interesting opportunity to build more residential units than perhaps a CS zoning might allow. We had a city council pre-screening in October of last year as well, where we had proposed 48 units with the zone change to RM40. This preceded the housing incentive program, which was formalized in January. So as we were continuing to work on our 48 home design, we started to look more closely at the housing incentive program, which would have us not do a zone change, but utilize that city council approved method to incentivize more housing units. As we've gone along, one thing that we've done that has made a larger unit count is to reduce the impact of 2-bedroom units. In October, we had 27 in a 48-unit plan. In May, we had 18 2-bedroom units. And now we have 7 2-bedroom units. And we also incorporated 32 studio units. So that's what caused a lot of the unit inflation as we've gone along. But we also think it's better for the ultimate users of this type of property for where they might want to be and where they want to get to, and a type of housing stock that we don't really see too much of coming online in the Palo Alto area. Another thing I just wanted to point out as a part of this is our initial application has included a transportation demand management write-up. This will be incorporated into the environmental review. But one of the primary recommendations that they have with this is to unbundle parking spaces from units, meaning if you rent or own a unit, you do not automatically get a parking space. You would have to pay a premium for that. And what these studies and these TDM studies have determined is that creates less of a demand for parking when you have to pay on top of your housing for it. What that does is it allows us to still operate an efficient building and sufficiently meet the demand of the users because there's alternative transportation measures provided to them, whether that's bicycle, bus, rail, or other means like carpools. So Eugene is the leader of Studio S Squared. We have his whole team here. So I'm going to hand you off to him, and I thank you guys very much for your consideration going out to the site and thinking about this project.
To the architect, if you could again state and spell your name, please.
Sure thing. Eugene Sakai, S-A-K-A-I, Studio S Squared Architecture. Is there a timer here? I'm just wanting to I want to respect the time limit.
You have a green light in front of you. You have 6 minutes and 18 seconds left. It'll turn yellow when you have 1 minute remaining.
Perfect, thank you. So thank you to Ted, and thank you also ARB members for your service to Palo Alto and to this project. We look forward to working with you in the weeks and months to come. Questions of whether this site is appropriate for housing, the density, parking ratios, and FAR of said housing are really above my pay grade and better left to elected officials, professional planners, and the collective wisdom of folks like yourself. As a residential architect, however, I do see the incredible potential that this site has for pointing the way towards a very different vision of San Antonio Road than what we see now. Driving up and down San Antonio Road now between Middlefield and 101 is not a very pleasant visual experience, as I'm sure you well know, especially...
Ma'am, if we could please let him finish his presentation. You will have your chance to speak, please.
Especially on our side of the street, it's mostly an unrelenting procession of parking lots, gas stations, and similar auto-oriented uses. Almost all buildings, even newer ones such as the JCC campus, feature unwelcoming blank or nearly blank walls facing San Antonio, making the streetscape even more inhospitable. The interesting thing about this stretch of San Antonio, especially on our side of the street, is the number of relatively large 1/4 to 1/2 acre lots with low utilization rates, and therein lies the potential. With carefully curated land uses and street-facing designs such as ours and the Marriott Hotel a few doors down, now under construction, it's not hard to envision how this stretch of 6 to 7 traffic lanes connecting the thriving employment centers along 101 to the Caltrain station at San Antonio and Alma Street could transform parcel by parcel over time into an environment much more attractive than what we see today. Our project sits nicely amongst a rich established network of bike lanes that connects our site to major employment centers, retail, and community amenities, all within easy biking distance. We believe that over time, dependence on the automobile will wane as bike and e-transport is promoted by forward-looking projects like ours, and the promise of self-driving vehicles gradually becomes a reality. For all of these reasons, we've designed a building that facilitates the bike and other alternative modes of transportation, limiting the footprint and visual impact of the car, with a rich materials palette that proudly fronts on and engages with San Antonio Road, with transparency deep into the landscaped courtyard heart of the building through a double-height lobby, and 170 feet of continuous ground floor glazing facing San Antonio to help enliven the streetscape. Instead of consigning the bicycle parking into an underground storage room, we've chosen to elevate it above grade and celebrate it, placing bike storage right off the main lobby and adjacent to a communal bike repair room and the community mail room, visible through that expansive glazing and clear to all passersby that this is a bike-friendly building. Our landscape design reinforces the centrality of our entry with a grand double stair for pedestrians and a pair of gradual ramps for bikes, taking visitors and residents from sidewalk level up to the residential lobby in an elegant and welcoming way. Our corner retail space continues the glazing motif with an at-grade entry and a distinctive overhang that provides both a signage opportunity and creates an interesting shadow line at the gracious corner plaza designed by our landscape architect. Auto access is relegated to Leghorn Avenue, as far away from the intersection as site geometry will allow. This frontage also offers a generous duckout for car share pickup and package delivery. Along San Antonio, we've broken down the mass of our building by stepping down from 4 stories at the corners to 3 stories in the middle, leaving room under the height limit for parapets, which will screen the rooftop solar panels and the mechanical equipment. Special 2-bedroom corner units will provide secondary focal points with their curtain wall design and further promote the idea of transparency. In typical housing projects, community open spaces are often inwardly focused spaces hidden deep within the building. In contrast, our public gathering space for the residents will be a grand rooftop terrace looking out over San Antonio Road. Having learned our lessons from rooftop gardens we've done in San Jose and lived in San Jose, we are here proposing a visually striking and highly functional shade structure with a gentle curve and 5 apertures to let palm trees grow up and sunlight filter down. The arched canopy here recalls the shape of the entry walkways, and besides offering daytime shade, also provides opportunities for evening gatherings with downlighting, speaker arrays featuring soft music, and strategically placed heat lamps. We've even created an opportunity for a connection with one of the past historic uses of the site with chrysanthemums and steel planters fronting the storefront glass along San Antonio. Thank you very much for your attention, and we look forward to hearing your input on how we can improve our project for this site.
Thank you very much. Very impressive timing. You have 1 second left. With that, we have 2 speaker cards. If anyone else member of the public would like to speak, please give us a card. If not, we have Joan Larrabee, followed by Warren Storkman. You will each have 3 minutes to speak. And if you could state and spell your name for the record, we would appreciate it, please. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Joan Larrabee. I live at 777 San Antonio Road, which is the Palo Alto greenhouse, which is a very beautiful and attractive with lots of green trees and grass and a swimming pool.
Could I please interrupt you to spell your last name for
Larrabee.
Thank you very much. Please continue.
Well, this has twice the number of units that it had in May, so we're kind of trying to hit a moving target here. The first thing is that the architect needs to learn how to count, which is something we learn in kindergarten. San Antonio Road, from the railroad tracks to 101, only has 4 lanes of traffic. It does not have 6 or 7. It only has 4. The city needs to realize that San Antonio Road, with only 4 lanes wide, is not built to accommodate the 4, 5, and 6-story buildings and all of their activities that the city is trying to thrust into that corridor. Mountain View, west of the train tracks and west of Alma Street over to El Camino, does have 6 lanes of traffic. In other words, it has a 50% higher capacity than we do where we live. It is already coming to a standstill. There have been times when I've had to go wait for the traffic signal through 3 cycles, and the hotel's not even open yet. The hotel's going to have 300 rooms. So the city has not allowed the infrastructure to accommodate all of the activities they're trying to push into this. We need a comprehensive traffic plan. We do not have one. Secondly, if you start putting in mechanical lifts, and then now they're talking about rental units, so which there will be turnover. I mean, I've been in my condo in Palo Alto with a garage for 35 years. I know how to open and close a garage door. But if you start having rentals where people come in and out, this year, 6-month rental, how long are the rentals going to be? 6 months, a year? You're going to change things. Again, we would like the project to be successful. We would welcome residents into the area. Primary land use along San Antonio is residential, but this is too many units with too many people coming and going, and the infrastructure does not support all of this activity and all of this construction. And it's only 4 lanes wide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Warren Storkman, please.
Pardon me. The name is Warren Storkman. I've been residing at 4180 McKay Drive for 64 years.
Could I trouble you to spell your last name, please?
Storkman, Stork and a man.
Thank you very much.
And I've been living in this residence for 64 years. I remember watching Eichler pushing the cows out of the way to build his homes coming towards San Antone 64 years ago. And now we're just bulging at the seams. And it seems to me what my major concern is, and hopefully you give it some consideration, is that San Antone Road is now becoming overused. We soon will have gridlock if we continue to let things like this develop. We won't have enough room for the cars. It's already bad because San Antonio and I live close to. And I think that you gentlemen and ladies should give some consideration of thinking about approving this project. And it's just too many people and too many cars on that, around Leghorn is where it is. And that's about what I can say is please give it real consideration because we don't need this a problem anymore. It's going to close San Antone Road down now. It's very serious. It's very serious. Your traffic will just be unbearable. Or I should say contributed to being unbearable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To the applicant, you have a chance to respond to or rebut any of the comments that have been made if you wish to speak.
No, thank you.
Okay, no, thank you. Then any questions from any of the board members for anyone? Then I would like to remind my colleagues that I think it's important for us to remember that this is a architecture review board, and with the zoning especially uncertain or unclear here, I'd really like to see us try to make positive comments towards the building and the design of the building. As much as there's a lot of questions arising about the zoning and the land use and the parking, our purview is really about what the building will look like. And I think that's how we can be most constructive. And before we start, I'd like to ask Ms. Larrabee, I know you've been very concerned about this project and the hotel next door, and I'd like to offer you a chance to address any comments you may have towards the design of the building, Do you have anything to say to us regarding how the building looks, its mass, its size? Because that's what we're here to look at. And I want to be sure that you've had a chance to say what you really think about that. I know in the hotel, you had some concerns, and we listened to you. So if my colleagues will humor me.
Put the front elevation up, the San Antonio Road elevation up, please.
Timer for 3 minutes.
Yeah, that looks,
So
I don't understand what the white thing is in the middle.
Okay, well, I don't want to guide
If
you
you
what to
want
say, but I'm
architecture,
just
I
giving
mean-
you a chance to give us feedback along the lines of what we're here to review.
I'm a little concerned about it. It looks like it's going to take off like a 747, but I don't understand what the white thing is. But, you know, I know he's trying. You know, you've got to go the in and out business and change the colors and everything, but I'm not real excited about it. But as far as the architecture, the parking and having underground parking is part of the architecture.
Of course.
And there's no parking for visitors or anything like that. So I prefer buildings either to be all glass or all brick, but that's just me. So I know he's trying, but I don't know what that white thing is there. It looks a little odd.
Okay, well, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for your comments. Okay, then, bringing it back to the board, Alex, could you start us off on this one, please?
Okay. So I have comments on the zoning, but if we're gonna bypass all that, I will gladly do it. I think, in my mind, I think it's worth the board discussing it at some level because it's new for us, right? The housing incentive program is new. We haven't reviewed it before. There are issues here, like say retail
Well, why don't we-
parking exemption that are in our letter, like in our letter to the council. You've put things like that, and it's sort of been addressed in the housing incentive program to a certain degree. So I think it's worth discussing it at some point, maybe not on this particular
Well,
project.
why don't
but-
we then separate our discussions? I think it's true that zoning is an important element. Why don't you address comments regarding the zoning change?
Sure.
And we'll go around and everybody can say their piece on that, and then we can come back to the architecture itself. I want to be clear to the architect that they get real guidance from us on the design of the building.
Yeah, no, that's what our role is, and we have PTC and council
But
as
why
well.
don't we first say, what do you think about this housing incentive program change? And then, or anything about the zoning, and then we'll come back to the rest of the design.
So it seems to me that the housing incentive program was intended for downtown and El Camino, as I understand it. And then so we have the CS zone on El Camino, and we have CS zone on San Antonio. So what is the difference? And I just want to say, in my mind, the difference is the transportation. So if you look at say the bus lines and community shuttles that serve San Antonio Road, it's pretty marginal. I'm looking at, it's like a mile walk to get to the Mountain View shuttle on Reinsdorf. It's like 3/4 of a mile to get to the Palo Alto shuttle on Charleston. Caltrain is over a mile away. That's like a 23-minute walk. But you can walk to Google. You can walk to Costco, which is a half a mile. So that's like a 10-minute walk. But to me, it's not the same. It's not the same as being on El Camino, which has pretty fast express buses. It's not really close enough to Caltrain. So to me, that's a major difference. The bus lines that are there, like the VTA bus lines, you can get to the research park, or you can get to East San Jose, or maybe Gunn High School, or the VA. But yeah, I'm finding it kind of lacking in there. But I would support it in concept just because of the large number of employees at Google. Is really relatively close by, and in theory, it can be done quickly by bicycle. On the retail, so we have, with the housing incentive program, right? I think that there's a parking, in the parking ordinance, there's a new provision that there's a 1,500 square foot exemption for parking for the retail, which I think is desirable from our point of view, because we've seen projects not, like housing projects without any retail on the ground floor. So I think I'm willing to support that. The downside I see is that if it doesn't have any parking, then people are either walking or they're parking on the street. But if anybody who knows San Antonio Road, like just circling around the block in that area at rush hour that's not possible. You're waiting through 2 or 3 light cycles. And it's just, you just wouldn't do that. You would just bypass the store. And we have businesses on El Camino, like Starbucks, and they say that like half of their business is just drive-by customers. They see it and it's like, oh, I'll stop here because I can get in and out quickly. So that's a major concern I have for the retail. I do support, in concept, having like a corner retail. I would say like cities like Emeryville and their big housing projects, they always are incorporating like sandwich shops and coffee places on their big housing projects, even when they're not in a major like downtown destination. And I think it does make a positive difference. I think I'll leave that at that for the zoning.
Yeah, okay, so why don't we work our way through. David, you also had some concerns or questions, at least. What do you think about the zoning change?
Well, I agree 100% with what Alex has said, and he's done an excellent analysis of the distances, environmental issues, and transportation issues. I have nothing to add to any of that. But it's a unfriendly corridor as it is now, although the majority of uses is residential on the opposite side of the street. That's certainly not true on this side of the street. And I would have thought that the city would, rather than run after housing so quickly in this area, done a more comprehensive plan for the whole block, all the way from the Mountain View end all the way down, and that it would have been a planning study of some greater depth. And unfortunately, we don't have that. We have a new building being placed here. So I'd reserve more of my comments to the building itself, but agreeing with Alex entirely about the planning issues.
Wonderful, thank you. Ozma?
Hi. Yeah, I think in terms of the zoning, so I live on San Antonio, just a little bit further away from this. So I pass this corridor pretty frequently. I have been passing pretty frequently for most of my life. And it's true, it's going through some changes right now. We're all talking about retail being important, and I will concur. Not just retail, but the martial arts studio that's there. There's sort of other, sort of not just coffee and sandwich shops, but community focused, ground level activities along that corridor that have some pretty strong communities that go there and come together, and I think that's really important to maintain. If this corridor, biking is becoming really big. This is a transit-oriented development. I've biked on San Antonio. It's not the most pleasant bicycle experience. So I definitely think the corridor itself could use some work. I know there's a lot of construction happening there right now. But I think it's true, if the street can be more amenable to the new modes of transit that are going to serve it, I think that would be a huge uplift to the thing. I mean, the Baylands is just down the street, and then a lot of people, I've often thought of biking down there, but a lot of the time I don't, just because it's really dangerous. But it would be great, this future vision of having bicycles be a part of, the corridor language. So I'm all in favor of that. So I think there's a possibility for something really great in the future.
Okay, I'm in agreement with what everybody else said. I have nothing further to add. Alex, why don't you start us off on the building design now?
Okay. Anyway, thank you for the presentation, and the package looks very good for being such a at the beginning stages of the review process. I think my main concern is the height of the retail space. So it's like 9-foot ceilings, which is relatively low for retail. Normally, we would look for something higher. If it's for that kind of space, if it's only like that size square footage, possibly lower is fine. I think that there is, I think you've got like the 2 glass corners. And I think the one on the left side, I think is not really working. When I look at the neighbor and what could happen next door, I'm not sure the left one makes sense. And also the left side is like a ground floor unit with a lot of glass right up against the street. That doesn't really make sense to me. I think you're also showing a, and I want to thank you for trying to do a prominent 2-story entrance on San Antonio Road. That's something that we ask for on El Camino, like as part of our El Camino guidelines, and we rarely get it. We don't require it here, but you're doing it, and so I definitely wanted to acknowledge that. I would actually probably try to encourage you to add some more detail to the secondary entrance. I think there's a stair entrance on Leghorn. I was sort of trying to pretend if I were living here. My hunch is that I would use that entrance on Leghorn. That would be my preferred way of getting in and out of the building. And it seems to me that could be a really nice entrance. I'm supportive of the brick. I think it does add a lot of texture. It's not really, it seems to me it's not really compatible with the neighborhood, but if you look at like the new Amazon building in East Palo Alto, the brick actually adds a lot of character to fairly boxy buildings. On the, what do we call it? On the canopy, on the 4th floor canopy with the Chinese windmill palms. I'm not sure I really understand what's going on. I don't really get that big idea, so maybe if the architect could explain it, it might help. I think I appreciate like trying to do something different, and I want to encourage you to think out of the box. I live on a street with 2 blocks of the Chinese windmill palms, and I really love them, and they really look great as like a silhouette against the sky. And like right now we've got the full moon. The full moon with the palm trees is really stunning, but I don't get that at all when you mix it in with the canopy. So I'm not really quite sure how that all works together. Also, with regard to the roof garden, if you look at our zoning code for roof gardens, I think we've added a new section for that, and it does require a minimum amount of landscaping, and I don't think that you're meeting it at this point. On the bicycle room, I did have 2 comments. One is that previous councils have asked for that on housing projects, like here in the downtown area. They really wanted the easy access to the bicycles because the theory is that it would enhance the usage of bicycles. If you have to go down to like a locked room in the basement, I think the tendency is that you would just leave it down in the basement. So I do want to acknowledge that, and I think that does make things better. In the research that I've done in some projects in Berkeley, I've read comments, online comments, that when they're in the lobby and they're just locked to a rack, that things get stolen off of the bikes. You know, it's not in a designated room that's locked, like a locked room in a locked building. So I think I think I just have that concern, that kind of concern. I generally like the idea of having open lounges and bike rooms all sort of mixed in together. The project in Berkeley called like the Parker, it's kind of like having a garage, you know, in your apartment building, like having a single-family garage in your apartment building. It's actually kind of nice. I have friends who lived in condominiums here in downtown, and they actually sold them and moved to houses because there's times like if you're mountain biking and you've got a dirty bike and you just want to hose it off. If you're in a fancy condo, there's actually nowhere to do it. Like they're missing all of that kind of space, and they just find them unlivable. Like they look nice in like marketing photos and stuff. When you're actually trying to live there and do things, they're actually not very usable. So I do like those kinds of spaces. And I do want to go back to one thing too. Also on the roof gardens and all the open spaces, I do want to encourage you to look at our open space, our revised open space definition, that we're really trying to get them to be usable. So usable for kids as well as adults, and not just lounge seating, but I mean, it can be like the fire pits. If you look at the Jewish Community Center, it's like senior housing, but the play area is used until like 9 o'clock every night by the neighboring kids. And at least in my neighborhood, the little one-bedroom apartments are now occupied by families. I mean, that's sort of where we are today with the prices in the neighborhood. And I think that might be all that I have. Oh, on one last thing on architecture, on landscape. I think at this point I could not support the landscape planting palette. I don't think it meets our native plant requirement yet, or the finding, which requires the greatest extent feasible that can be maintained. I think it's not there yet with the, particularly with like the shrubs. It's missing like all 4 of our major native plant shrub categories, which is like manzanitas, ceanothus, eriogonums, and sages. So that's all that I have at the moment. I'm curious to see what my other board members think.
Sorry, through the chair. Sorry, excuse me, through the chair.
Oh, through the chair, yes. Okay, David, what do you think?
Sorry, through the chair. Just in response to Board Member Liu's comment about the retail height on sheet A, 5.0A, there's a cross section. It's a little more height than 9 feet. I mean, not much more. It's like additional 1.5 feet. It's kind of sunken down into the garage space.
I think I saw those some dashed lines, and I think I did notice that. Thank you for that, though.
Does that change your thought, Alex, if it's 10.5 feet high compared to 9?
Yeah, I think I said that 9 was okay in my mind. I think my point is higher is better. So say like there's a new mixed use building near me, near my house, and it has a Pete's on the corner with like, the glass corner. And I haven't measured it, but I was looking at photos, and I think it's like 12 or 13 feet high, and it looks really nice. It's nice, open, spacious, and light, and people hang out there. And to me, that's where we should try to get that, ideally.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention, Sheldon. David?
First, I want a question then, Sheldon and staff. How is the commercial going to be used? What is it planned for? Nobody's spoken to that.
Well, I think we have to defer to the applicant on that.
Okay. I
Did they have
understood
to
it was
put
going to be...
retail
Is it
like
going to be
in?
general retail, or is it a physical
We'll
program
have the
for
applicant respond
tenants
to that.
David, could we put that off and just get our comments out first, and we'll
All right.
get the
Well, that's
applicant
very important, I think, at this point to determine that.
Would you prefer the applicant answer that question now, then?
But I'll weave that into what I'm going to say. In looking at this building from a planning point of view, I noted that four-story building, a lot of tenants in it at upper levels. There's a single elevator, and it's on the Leghorn corner of the building. And there's a refuse room on the opposite corner, not near any stair whatsoever. So I'm looking at this, and Alex referred to this in a more minor way, but for me it's the most major issue here in the way this building is organized. Because in fact, the traffic and closeness of the street here is really not a nice environment to be adjacent to or walking to. The building will be accessed, I think, from the Leghorn corner, and the Leghorn corner is kind of given over to this retail usage. Whereas if that retail usage were something like a health club or whatever for the building itself, it could be put on an upper level, and you could have a major entry at that corner of Leghorn. And it seems to me that would make so much more sense for the way in which this kind of a building, which is really longer along San Antonio than it is width-wise and going it deep into the site. So if you entered where the elevator was, you'd certainly be better capable of getting access to your apartment. Something illogical about having an entry in the middle of the building, in a symmetrical building of this nature on the street, which forces people to walk to the middle of the building, and then where are they? They're in a lobby, but they aren't anywhere near the elevator. To me, it's not a logical arrangement. So I would recommend that you reconsider the major location of the entry into this building on Leghorn, which the setback from San Antonio Road is a nice feature because it allows you to give some more privacy to the ground floor usages, which could then be more residential usage on that facade. And they would then have a kind of a setback relationship with a building that would give them some privacy so that they wouldn't be on view from the street. Of course, the other aspect is then the service portion of the building where garbage would be collected, could be more on the area closer to where the elevator or service is at that end of the building, Leghorn end of the building. And then you would have the garbage getting out to the street somehow, because where else are you going to take the garbage to? It goes to a garbage room in the cellar at present, and that room is at the other end of the building as well. This is sort of obvious planning, and I think it hasn't been logically arranged here. And it does set up an aesthetic for the building itself. So then you have a major entry on San Antonio Road in the middle of the building, which is kind of a, well, it's a kind of a symmetrical quality to this building that really doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in terms of people entering the building. There's no reason why two paths would be used in this way in that front to go through the landscape to the central entry at that location. All right, going on. These are, practical planning thoughts. I think this would have the possibility of a much better building if it weren't a prisoner to its symmetry. So the symmetry carries through to the roof of the building as well, to what is really a kind of it reminds me more of a kind of a Miami Beach kind of idea of putting trees on the rooftop like this. We've been looking at other buildings in which the socializing space is in an open area at an upper level, and they're quite successful if they're more designed to the use of the kind of a tenant that's in the building. And I think that there are reasons why people will get together and have parties, et cetera, on a rooftop like that. But this is arranged to create a kind of a false sense of open space up there. It isn't a real useful space. It isn't planned for furnishing for it to be useful on there. It's just a kind of a physical presentation for show and tell, not for a use function. I'm not understanding what the vertical strips are on this building. I don't really see it detailed here, but in the earlier drawings that we had, their vertical strips are kind of decorative elements on the front. They've been removed. I can't really tell if they've been removed or not in this iteration. What I'm looking at here on the screen doesn't seem to show that anymore. And if they're not there, then I appreciate that it's a simpler scheme that way, and the ins and outs of the building are what determine the facade of the building. So I would urge you to look at this design differently. If you're going to make the corner at Leghorn into, and you ought to do so, into the major entry and a major lobby where you have that glassy corner, and then as you move down the block through the middle of the building, the volumes could relate more so that it isn't symmetrical, so that you really don't have that opposite end looking like the entry to the building. You note that I note that the entire relationship of the glass mullions is very casual. There's no kind of order to it. I think that if you're going to create a glass feature, you really ought to use it as an emphasis, and it ought to be designed entirely from ground to top, and it ought to be the major expression of this building. That's pretty much what I have to say.
Thank you, David. Osma?
Hi there. I just wanted to thank my fellow board members for their comments. Thank the applicant for their presentation. Thank the members of the public for speaking, especially Mr. Storkman, who gave us the visual of Eichler chasing the cows away. That was a highlight. I'm going to just focus on the aesthetics of the architecture. I did want to make a note to the applicant for next time we see this. It's really important for us, when we're reviewing this, to really understand your design intent. And part of that is being very clear about your observations of the site that are not only functional observations, but environmental, aesthetic, and like ambient impressions of the site. And relate that to how your project is responding to that. So, for example, if you find that Palo Alto, this street in particular, has a really strong landscape. We have a lot of trees. The adjacent properties have a lot of trees. Then make a story of how your project really brings that in and makes greenery an integral part of the design. Obviously, that's not the story you told today, but I'm giving you an example of something where you can show how this building is really important. It's specific to this site It's not just any building that could be anywhere in Palo Alto or even in the United States or even anywhere in the world. But why this is important for this particular site, because this site is unique, and this building is going to be really important because it's going to be up and coming, and it's going to be something that future buildings are going to be next to, and we're going to look at, this is going to be part of the future context. I think it's really important that this relationship to the city, street, to the people that use this site, to cars, is part of the architecture. It's not just the planning and the zoning and the floor, the first floor plan. It's about the facade. It's about how people are going to actually feel when they're walking down this street. And at the moment, they're going to feel a big wall of glass. And even the relationship that the residential units have to the street, these windows don't look operable. There's no connection right now between this building and the street, especially on the corners. There's a bit more of connection where you've got the screen in the middle, and I think out of this whole facade that we're looking at, that middle part where you have the screen is probably the most dynamic and interesting architectural element that we've kind of encountered, and everything else kind of feels a step away from that. The facade is sort of in danger of being a little too flat everywhere else, and it's missing a lot of character as a result. And so, so the glassy corners of the building feel a little more office than they do residential, and I know a lot of newer multifamily housing is using a glassy character, but is that right for Palo Alto? Maybe it's right for over there, but there's a strong, I feel like there's a lot of conceptual development that I think would really strengthen this design. In terms of the rooftop, the curved canopy is a bold choice. It's sort of in that place where I could see maybe a potential for it to get more interesting, but at the moment where it has no relationship to anything else in the building, and so it really doesn't feel justified in that way. But I think if it did, or if there was more of a story of why it was like that, I think there'd be, I'd be on board a little bit more. So yeah, the design is sort of under-articulated, and that rendering of the courtyard should not have been in the packet, honestly. In terms of the material, you have a lot of material expressions throughout your facade. The most simplest one is from the back, where we're just looking at brick and one other material, I can't remember it right now. But on the front, we're sort of looking at a glass expression, a stucco expression, a brick expression, and a metal panel expression. It's quite a lot. It seems like a little bit too much. I understand you're trying to break up a big facade. I don't know if using 4 different types of expressions is the right way to do that. I think there's other things you could do in terms of adding relief. So there's a question about, do the windows add relief? I think where the screen is there, I think that's sort of a little bit more successful, but everywhere else, it's, I think that plus the extra materials is a bit too jarring on the eyes. Materially speaking, though, I don't mind the brick. I agree that it adds a lot of character in an otherwise, blank facade. I think it sort of makes blank facades really interesting. And there's very few other materials that do that, unfortunately, unless you go through the actual trouble of articulating your stucco facade. I'd support raising the retail floor so that bottom floor is a little bit taller. I could support changing the entry to the corner as well. And understand right now the entry's sort of breaking up the facade, but if the middle were, that community space, the martial arts studio, ballroom dance studio, or whatever it may be, that could also break up the facade as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be the entry. So yes, a lot of work to do on this design. It's got a little ways to go. I'm just going to reiterate that design intent is really important. So whatever your design intent, I heard the applicant say transparency. I think that on its own isn't enough. There needs to be more about the site and why the design is the way it is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I find myself in agreement with my colleagues and find their comments insightful and appropriate. In no particular order, but to reiterate what Osmo was saying, the applicant made a number of statements painting a picture of San Antonio, which were not entirely positive, and yet we have a building with enormous walls of glass looking at this avenue. If it's not that positive a street, why is the building doing what it's doing? And I'm not saying it should be one way or the other, but she's bringing up a very valid point about trying to take your design to a level where you really do make sure it fits into this location and this community and these needs. And my feeling is that it really just needs a little bit more thought, and I can understand where, as an applicant, you've got so many balls in the air, so many agencies and boards and laws to meet that it's complicated. But let me bring that around then, because David's comment about the organization of the building at a fundamental level, I think, is very insightful. If you were to put the primary entrance on the corner, it would make more sense organizing the building. It would let you then respond to Alex's comment about the two glass elements, the symmetrical organization not making sense. The one on the left doesn't relate as well. You only have one corner really on the building. It would let you then perhaps question the use of the retail. Retail is a funny term to use here. This is a destination type space, like the karate studio. Somebody has an appointment, they go there at a certain time. They don't need to drive by it. It doesn't need a corner presence. It's not like it's on El Camino. It could easily be a second and third floor studio in the middle of that corner tower, with the fourth floor being your open area, which would then enjoy a much nicer view. You then wouldn't have residential units on the west-facing facade, where right now it'd be really tough to, on a day like today, in that glass room, I would never want to be there, even with shades and air conditioning. That kind of just react to the site a little bit more. But it might be worth questioning what that retail really is going to be. I know you have to have it, and it's a struggle for you from a design point of view, but maybe come up with a more creative idea, or you could put it someplace else along the ground floor that doesn't need as much visibility, because it doesn't. The other element of the building planning, though, that I question and would like to get my colleagues to respond to is the overall massing. This is a 4-story tall building, and it goes pretty much straight up to 4 stories. And we are tasked with finding it to be contextually compatible. And I know on the hotel project up the road, we struggled mightily with that and forced a series of step backs and quite a bit of landscaping on the terraces of the building. And it seems to me we haven't addressed whether we think that's appropriate here. I think it is, and I think a design with more of a central corner, a tower perhaps on the corner, some larger element there, but then with the building stepping down away from that, would be more appropriate. I would like to see the applicant provide us with renderings of what this looks like as you come up San Antonio from, say, the corner of Charleston, working your way up, similar to what we had done for the hotel project again, because this really is visible against the skyline of the hills for people going up and down San Antonio Road, and it's one of the first things you see coming into the town. And right now, I fear that it's 50 feet tall, straight up, and it will form quite a boxy presence. So I'm concerned about that massing. I found that the parking layout downstairs didn't quite work. Some of those spaces were just a little bit too tight to get in and out of, and I'd like to see you just think it through a little bit more. I know it's schematic, but the stacker units with only 20 feet or so of backup space in front in the corner sides really were tough. I'd also like to see you think through a little bit more the street drop-offs. This site will make extensive use of things like Ubers and ride-sharing services. And San Antonio especially is a very busy road. I think it's imperative that you have ample places to pull over and make a delivery, pick someone up. And I see only one small space on Leghorn, and it's very unlikely somebody wants to turn into Leghorn, because then they have to wait for the signal and the traffic delay. So I think you really need to think through how that's going to work. The transportation is critical on this project, and that's a key element of it for most buildings in this area today. I find the courtyard, the way you've designed it, to be just too tight. I think it will be dark and unused. Again, 4-story walls surrounding a space of that scale. I'm afraid I don't think it will work. In any case, you should satisfy yourself that it will and then present us with images and renderings to back that up, because right now what we see is horrific, and we'd like to really believe that that space will be useful. As Ozma mentioned, I think you have so many different architectural styles and vocabularies at play here. And I think the brick is a fine choice. It seems to feel residential, although maybe it's new for the area, but certainly you could get with that. But then to be pairing that with all these other elements, the glass curtain walls, and then these sort of massive cantered beveled elements, the white things around the entrance, and then the curve on the roof. There's just so much going on to maybe tone down your design hand a little bit and think of one way to go. I think that you do need to have more indigenous plants in the landscaping just to meet our code. I question whether the palm trees on the roof are practical. This is a wood frame structure, and palm trees are large and heavy and need a real substantial planter to thrive. And you don't have room to drop them into the structure with the apartments below. I just wonder how that's really going to work. I do agree that a shaded outdoor roof terrace is a wonderful potential space. You might want to think through whether the trees and the shade canopy work together and what's a way to really accomplish that. It is critically important that that space be well landscaped and well thought through so it's very functional. With that, I'd like to get my colleagues to respond to David's idea on the corner entrance. Alex, you didn't say anything about that. And then the massing and the stepping of it, just so we're giving them clear direction as a board. Alex?
I support corner retail. I don't think I support a corner residential entrance. Retail really needs visibility. And I think you guys have had comments about putting things up on the upper floors, and I don't really understand that. It seems to me that raises all sorts of other issues. But I can understand, like, I think I understand the idea, though, of trying to reorganize the building. And so I don't want to discourage other ideas from occurring.
I'm just trying, that's a big change for the applicant. I want to be sure they're hearing clearly what we're saying.
But retail should be on the corner.
Okay, you think retail should be on the corner, okay.
And we don't know what it is. I mean, we don't really know what it could be, and it could be many different things over the lifetime of the building. So it should be flexible.
How about the stepping of the building as it goes up? Do you have any response to that?
Yeah, I'm undecided. I stood over by the greenhouse and spent a lot of time looking at it the other day. I think you're characterizing it as this 50-foot wall, but I don't really quite see it like that because the middle is different, and it's only 3 stories. And it depends how you read that roof canopy. Yeah, I think the hard thing here is that we have our context findings, but in this case, there's really not a lot of context to work with. We've got like abandoned buildings in Mountain View and like 1-story mid-century buildings to the left of the site. So I think it's very hard to get it to work. I think it ideally would be breaking up the massing or the materials, perhaps even more than what's shown, and maybe not trying to make it a symmetrical composition, but actually just trying to make clear differences in the facade. So say like Santana Row. It's actually like it's an artificial break in the facades to make it appear, to make them seemingly smaller. A lot of times architects, they draw the facade in isolation, right? And I'm thinking this is longer than the neighboring buildings, right? So if we looked at it like a streetscape of the rest of the block, let's try to bring in the rhythm of the street, of those street facades into the building. And they're trying to do that. They're starting to do it, and I think I would just encourage to do that even more. And then with your comment about the massing, to me, I guess that's like a floor area issue, right?
The 1 point, so I think we've always struggled with, the board has always struggled with 2.0 floor area on every project that I've seen. Generally, I think that on the big hotel projects, usually when it goes down to like 1.75, you get more stepping, and usually people are happier with that. So I will just leave it at that.
I'm trying mostly to get us to be consistent. We pushed the hotel project very hard to step, and they have, and I think it makes a difference looking up against the skyline. Do we want the same thing here? And they need to hear that from us right now.
And we did that with the board pushed really hard on the Hilton Garden Inn to push the floor area down from 2 to 1.75, and it steps on the El Camino frontage, and I think it's effective.
Any thoughts, Osma?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to revise what I said in terms of the entrance. I do agree with Board Member Liu that the retail should be on the corner because of visibility and also just longevity. Maybe, I feel like Board Member Hirsch's comment was mainly about the functionality of the inside, and so that could be revised to make the entrance make more sense. But I do agree that the retail corner is the right way to go. So in terms of the massing, I do think that if this architecture, like if the facade had more relief, and if it had more character, and if the design intent, whatever it is, whether it's like a screening intent, or if there's a strong landscaping element, was threaded through the facade more thoughtfully, I think this could work. Like, the stepping back may not be needed because of the relief. Like if we had a deep enough relief at the front, it would be potentially more palatable without needing to step back. So it might be an outlier. I think the 2.0 FAR could work, but it just requires way more thoughtful architecture to make it work. And I'm also going to slightly disagree with Board Member Liu on the context. I do think there is a lot to respond to in the context. It's not really a one-for-one thing. There's obviously, this is like its own thing in this area, but there is, I feel like you don't need necessarily another building to want to be like, but I think it's sort of more about the feeling of the street that you can translate into newer architecture. So in terms of context, and then also across the street, there's just a lot to respond to in terms of architectural concepts that this thing could work on. So I think there's a lot of opportunity.
So my comment about the context is just really the literal wording of our ordinance, which is like window patterns, colors, materials. So I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. I was just reading our context criteria, which were really meant for really urban areas, and they weren't really written for sort of more suburban areas with setbacks and parking in front of the buildings.
Sure, that's fair.
The context is predominantly one-story commercial buildings, and this is a 50-foot tall, four-story building. David, do you have any thoughts to add, especially at the corner and the massing? And then we'll wrap it up then.
Well, yes, that's my biggest concern. I think it creates a different kind of a building if you start with a premise that you're going to enter from Leghorn. And, I disagree with my fellow board members here that the commercial has to be on the ground floor, because I don't think it's really that kind of commercial. Or in fact, if it is some kind of a commercial that's really used exclusively by this building, then they too could access it from a second floor. And if it's something like an athletic facility or exercise facility for the building, definitely doesn't need to be on the first floor. So defining what that retail really is very, very significant for this building, especially if you consider just functionality, that the right place for the entry is going to be the corner. I think that really sets the character of the rest of the building too, with the massing happening at the corner, more or less what you were saying, Peter, before, that that would be the defining element of the building. You'd want to enter there, you'd want to have the access to bicycles there, you'd want to make that the major activity corner of the building. It's on the street, it has access from the street, it has access from the side street, because we all agree it's a 4-lane street. It can't really accept much happening off of San Antonio Road. It's a very, very busy road. You really want to get off of it in order to use the building. So the character of the building ought to be something where it's focused at the corner, and then it's a repetitive series of elements that move down the block. It is not, after all, a building that fills a block front from one street to the next. The end of the building further down is only partway to the next intersection. There's going to be another building there at some point, likely. So there's no reason to feature it exclusively as a symmetrical building the way it's been described. I think the setback allows for the front to have different uses on the ground floor. I mean, instead of being just a entryway, if the entry is moved, it can accommodate more of the residential with the private areas on the outside still relieved from the street by the distance the building is set back. I want to point out that I don't think any of the rear of the building, and our fellow board members ought to consider the tightness of this building around the perimeter, because there's residences immediately close to adjacent walls of commercial right now. And there ought to be some exterior private garden usages on the outside of the building at the rear and at the far side. As to the open space, I don't know why it couldn't be part of, say, the upper floor of the building. You know, the exciting thing about the valley and the context of the whole valley is that one direction you look across the bay and you see mountains on the other side, and up the hill you're looking at the foothills and the foothill mountains that are up there. So the views from so many areas, including the senior center, are really up or down the hill. So knowing the context, not just of this street, but of the whole valley, is, I think, very significant for the way buildings are designed here in Palo Alto. I've been super impressed by those areas where you have views of the mountains that create this valley. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done on this. Just in terms of some of the detail, yeah, there's a repetition of the same kind of window again and again here, slight variations, but if you're having decks and interior divisions of the spaces on the outside, you can try a window that isn't just in the center of a box. So there's a lot of other varieties of window forms that have not been explored in this design. I'm talking more of the physical design. The context down the street, of the street, on this side of the street, wouldn't it be nice if it in some way answered the issues of a bicycle path that began somewhere here or began up the hill further and allowed you to get down to the Baylands? So the front of the building is really ought to be a continuing bicycle path that leads to the Baylands, for example, which a comment was made, it's impossible to get there. I agree. It's not a friendly environment, but if the buildings are in a setback, then the possibility of the front of the building as a landscaped continuum that takes you down to the Baylands would be a generous offer from this project. So plantings that would be accommodating to that sort of setback would be a major improvement, an urban improvement to the street.
Thanks, David. I just wanted to make sure we had clear guidance to the applicant regarding the corner retail and the massing of the building. What I've heard is that I think a majority of us would like to see, at least half of us would like to see the actual retail activity on the ground floor at the corner. And I think nobody's opposed to finding a way to make the building entrance on or near the corner either, just to be clear. And I haven't heard any consensus beyond that, so I think we should leave it at that. Does the applicant have any question or thought before we close up? And I'll be looking to my colleagues for a motion in a second. We're trying to keep this informal. We really want to be sure you understand and have a sense of where to go.
Board Member Hirsch, we haven't gone that deep on what ultimately the retail usage would be. I think that the most obvious opportunity would be a cafe of some sort. I think it would get a high amount of usage from this building. We've stayed away from the exercise facility idea, both for the amenities of these ultimate tenants, because the Oshman JCC is right up the street and it provides a lot of different opportunities for exercise and classes, and it's a wonderful community service. It's right up the street.
Okay, thank you. With that, do we have a motion? Oh,
I just want to clarify.
Please, go ahead. I'm sorry.
A couple of things. So there was a fair amount of discussion about the ceiling height at the retail. The typical floor-to-floor height at the residential is 9. And so the podium is actually set at 30 inches above grade. So if you step back down to grade at the corner retail, you add 30 inches to the typical 9-foot ceiling. So the corner retail ceiling height is actually 11.6. I actually feel pretty strongly about keeping the retail on the corner. You know, the retail tenants kind of on this stretch of San Antonio, there's a lot of vacancy there. You know, retail tenants seem to be struggling, actually. You know, before I became a residential architect, you know, I was a retail architect doing shopping centers all over the Bay Area. And, you know, the corner spaces are always the most desirable for tenants. They capture higher rents per square foot. They're more visible. They're more desirable. They're more accessible. And so I really don't support the idea of moving a retail use up into the upper floors of the building. I think it creates a lot of issues with access. You know, right now there's a clear division between public access at the ground floor at the corner, and to sort of move that retail component with hopefully a fair amount of traffic up into the bowels of the building, to me it sort of goes against what good retail design has proven to be over the years. We actually at one time had a corner lobby entrance right at the intersection of San Antonio and Leghorn. It was closer to the elevator. One of the big downsides that we saw in that previous design, which we took all the way up to City Council, was that it really offered no transparency between the lobby and the inner landscape courtyard. And right now we have that. We have a glass curtain wall at a 2-story lobby with a similar glass curtain wall at the interior of the courtyard, which will offer a really, I think, unusual and very nice view of greenery through that glass on both sides.
Excuse me, Eugene, if we could, we're looking for you to respond to our comments, not to continue to sell the building to us, because we really want to wrap up.
Okay. With regard to context, I mean, I do agree with Commissioner Liu in that, you know, there really isn't a lot to respond to in terms of architectural form. I think the nicest thing about this stretch of San Antonio, as one of the members of the audience pointed out, is actually the landscaping right across the street, you know, for the greenhouse apartments. And really that's what we were trying to open up onto. So, you know, all of your comments are really well taken, well appreciated. There's quite a diversity of thought here, so I'm not quite sure actually if we have a direction, you know, that I can kind of walk away with and sort of noodle on with my staff here, but perhaps in the remaining minutes that we have, you can come to some clear direction for us. That would be much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking for a motion from someone, I presume, to continue this. with, I just don't know if we have any more clear guidance than what we've already put out in the record.
Okay. I move that we continue this project to a date uncertain.
I will second that.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the motion carries 4-0. We're going to move right along to this next item. Staff, are we ready for this next item? Yeah, we're just saying the same things over and over again. We've been at this an hour and a half. It needs a lot of work, though. Are we ready to move forward on this? An hour and a half already. Okay, item number 3 is a public hearing regarding 180 El Camino Real. It's a request for architectural review to allow for exterior facade improvements to an existing tenant space for L'Occitane in Building C at the Stanford Shopping Center. Do we have any disclosures, please?
I visited the site last night.
Anybody else?
I visited the site.
I visited the site.
I've also visited the site, and I'm fairly familiar with the shopping center. Okay, Sam, a staff report, please.
Good morning, board members. Samuel Gutierrez, project planner for this project and the shopping center. Just one quick correction on the title for this on the agenda. There's a typo. It says Ocetane instead of L'Occitane, so the L was mistyped.
Thank you,
Just wanted to
Sam.
state that for the record. Moving on to the presentation here. This is located at Stanford Shopping Center, 180 El Camino, and it's located within Building C. This project here involves the tenant that's currently existing at one of the main entryways of the shopping center, L'Occitane, and a facade improvement, which involves changing out the existing facade for a new modern minimalist looking facade, along with new planters, green roof, and a public seating, and new signage. This application does not involve any change of tenant. Again, L'Occitane is going to stay. It's just changing their facade design, and there is no changes to any of the development standards of the site overall with this application, such as FAR coverage, parking, circulation, anything of that nature. So here you can see the existing conditions of the L'Occitane tenant space within Building C of the shopping center. Just to give you a little bit of bearings, this is across the drive aisle from the Fleming's restaurant. Adjacent to this tenant space along the El Camino frontage is Papyrus, the retailer. And then across the shopping center entryway, it's Vineyard Vines. Again, it's one of the primary entrances to the shopping center. You can see here the existing tenant space does not extend to the full height or the full parapet height, which is the current mall standard. This was done prior to that standard being established. And you can see the design has a bit of a plexi kind of glass design mixed in with multiple mullions that kind of break it up into different little sections here. So when we, there we are. So the proposal here shown is showing the new facade meeting the current mall standards, which is the facade would extend all the way up to the parapet top, and it would actually complete this kind of row of tenant spaces along El Camino being updated to the current standards. You were just provided a material sample board for these proposed materials, along with an updated sheet that's in the submitted plans, but this sheet actually correlates the materials to the rendering, so you could more easily see what materials proposed where. Here you can see the kind of simple, modern, kind of minimalistic design, simple lines with backsplash of yellow on the top. It's recessed a bit from the rest of the storefront. There is some LED lighting proposed around the ring there. That's that kind of halo effect that this rendering is showing. And then there's new signage. It's again the L'Occitane in Province copy, which is the brand, and a blade sign proposed along with this upper trellis kind of feature that is adjacent to the proposed green roof. The column, because this is a storefront that is cut out and there is actually a pass-through there. It doesn't extend to the full, building section. They're proposing a smooth column with a small planter and a circular seating bench, along with two new planters for the storefront entrance. And just going back to the previous storefront, you could see that the kind of fenestration, the glass openness is a bit reduced here compared to the proposal, which opens up the storefront a lot more to pedestrians, so the window surface area increases. Here we kind of get a little site plan of this tenant space and some of the improvements, in particular some of the landscaping. Again, there's a green roof proposed, and then the two planter boxes and the circular planter there. None of these plants are actually native plants for the per the requirements that we have for the ARB findings. They're not native to California or regional indigenous, but they are low water usage to medium water use, and they do tie in the raw materials that are utilized for the products that are sold inside of L'Occitane. It kind of pulls that connection in from the interior to the exterior. And with that, that's something that we would welcome a discussion from the ARB on, because again, there is no native California plants at all in this proposal. Here you can see the one of the proposed signage for the new tenant storefront. Again, it's L'Occitane in Province. It has the wall sign on the upper facade, and then there is a small blade sign. I do want to note that the rendering here shows a larger blade sign, but that's rendering error. It's actually proposed to be that smaller blade sign that's shown there on that elevation view, because that would meet the mall standards. Some key considerations for the board to look at here is the applicability of the master tenant facade and sign program for the shopping center, the architectural theme, design, cohesiveness, and quality of the materials, and its relation to the shopping center in general. And then, of course, just a discussion of the ARB findings in relation to the landscaping, because again, there is no native plants suggested here or proposed. So staff recommends that the board recommend approval of the proposed project to the Director of Planning and Community Development based on the findings and subject to conditions of approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Any members of the public wish to address this project? Seeing no one, there's questions from staff, from board members?
Yeah. The actual letters are illuminated, correct?
Yes.
So the letters are illuminated and the border is illuminated?
Yes,
Correct?
that's the current proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, to the applicant, you have 10 minutes if you'd wish to present your project. You will have 10 minutes to speak. If you could state and spell your name for the record, please, we'd appreciate it.
Chair Baltain, board members, pleasure to be back in front of you once again. Project over at Stanford Shopping Center. We're here to present.
State and spell your name for the record, please.
Jason Smith, Jason Smith, Landshark Development. We have here with us today, we have Paul Blackburn with L'Occitane. I was mispronouncing it as well. And he'll give a brief presentation on the project, concept of intent, and then we'll be glad to answer any questions you may have. Paul?
Good morning. My name is Paul Blackburn. That's Blackburn, Blackburn, and I'm with L'Occitane. So yes, that's how it's pronounced. I was actually here 7, nearly 8 years ago for the previous build out of this store. So thank you once again for giving us some consideration. I think to give some context to what we're doing here with this remodel, obviously when we built the previous store out, we also had the roof across the atrium space in the middle of the shopping centre. All of the facades on the main stretch have now gone up. We're looking to upgrade and modernise. Excellent. The store, obviously, to tie in with what's been going on recently in the centre, and also to give us a better brand representation today. The previous build-out was inspired by our branding concept at the time, which was based on the greenhouse, which was where all that fenestration and articulation of the facade came from. And we wanted to kind of allude to our natural ingredients, which is where the landscape lavender mosaic came from as well. Today, we're really trying to embrace the authenticity of our brand, but also alluding to the modernity of our brand too, which is why we've removed the visual of that landscape and we've replaced it with genuine nature. And we think the addition of the nuance of this particular location and that small flat roof gives us an opportunity to create a green roof, which is something we actually don't have anywhere else in North America, and we think would be a really beautiful addition, not only to our brand, but to this shopping centre. To speak a little bit to the non-native ingredients, it's really important for us, again, with regard to the authenticity of us, to have something that represents what we are selling. We're very proud that all of our ingredients are sourced from the Mediterranean region, and all the ingredients we use in our products. And we want to make sure that if we're showing nature, that it's something that is part of our brand. So obviously we couldn't show, or it'd be a stretch to show something that was native to California if it's not something that we use in any of our products. So that's the reason, and it's recognizing your typical requirements, but that's kind of our exception, if you like, that we're asking for your consideration. The yellow is a beautiful textured Venetian plaster, which in its mass looks very simplicity, but in execution is a beautiful finished material. And the white is, again, a natural limestone travertine, which we think would be a beautiful addition to the facade. On the whole, we're very grateful for the largely supportive comments from the staff review, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, Osma, go at it.
Where does the blue happen on your facade?
The blue?
There's
It's on the edge of the sign.
It's just on the edge of the sign, that's all.
It's on the edge of the words.
Yes.
So what is the finish of your mullions on your storefront?
They are a simple dark bronze metal finish.
Dark bronze, okay. And just to clarify, the yellow is, you said it was a stuck
It's a Venetian plaster.
plaster.
So it's an exterior grade Venetian plaster.
But the sample board says it's a powder-coated finish with the yellow specified here, is that right?
That's for the signage as well.
Sorry, go for it. Yeah, it shouldn't do.
That's on the signage as well. Both of those two samples are representative of the sign itself.
Oh, the little flag sign, not the facade?
The Venetian plaster should be off to the right on your sample board. If you look at the back of your packet as well. Oh, that.
But do you have a physical sample of it?
We do not have a physical sample of the plaster.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have one quick question. Is there a finish on the oak?
Excuse me?
Is there a finish on the oak? Like a clear coat or a oil?
An applied oil will be on the oak.
Osma, why don't you start us off? What do you think?
Sorry, I'm a little blindsided. I thought we had everything. Well, I will say I do appreciate your vision. Your design intent is really clear. I like that you're using the landscape. I don't have a problem with the non-native choices because it has a strong design relationship to your brand. So I'm fine with that. I was actually all thumbs up until I didn't know what this yellow thing is. So that's a problem. I'm sure it's a great material. Maybe it could come back to subcommittee just so we can look at it. But in terms of the design itself, I don't have any problems with it. I do have a note, the location of the camera where you have it right now at the top, I'd want to explore if you could put that underneath the lowest part, just because it sort of interrupts the facade in a way that we wouldn't prefer. So it depends on your field of views, of course, but
I would love that to happen. It's actually a shopping center camera, it's not ours.
I thought so.
So we have no control over it.
but you're already moving it, right?
I don't think we are. I think it's staying where it is at the moment.
No, you're moving it.
We are.
The shopping center is moving it up higher. Lower, they wouldn't get the field of view, so they thought higher than mid-design would be better. Excuse me.
And there was no negotiations with the shopping center about the field of view? Like, are they saying, like, can they confirm that if they make it lower, the field of view doesn't work?
We can confirm that with them.
That would be good. It's just, it's interrupting it. And if that could be just, sounds like a 10-minute conversation with their camera guys. So that's all my notes.
David?
Well, it's quite an improvement, I think. The color is so incredibly intense there in the corner, such a prominent corner. I think you're going to attract a lot more people to that corner now because of that. I really like it a lot. I think the simplification of every aspect of it is an improvement here. And in fact, I would hope that everybody else gets the idea that they should do something with the ugly facades up on the top all along the way, so that it, what is there now, and it, you know, if you spend a few minutes and kind of look around instead of just running down the pathway there, you'd be aware that this has been a mistake for years up above, and you've managed to make it, well, it was before more interesting, but now it's even a more improved look and simplification to the top of the building. I don't find anything wrong with this at all.
Thank you, David. Alex?
Yes, thank you for your presentation, and I can recommend approval of the project. I do have one major issue, which is the planter at the corner, at the column, with just like 3-inch plants and no drainage and hand watering. It seems to me that seems to be a maintenance issue. Like a 3-inch plant in a planter like that may need to be watered every day. Really, there isn't enough root structure to and also because in planters there's typically like typically you use like a lightweight soil that doesn't retain water, and they do that so that the plants don't get root compaction. So that's a major issue for me. I don't know what we do about that. It seems to me it's a tricky detail to do because it's a structural column. On the plant or native plant finding, I think I would just add that for the staff, I mean that the rosemary is also really kind of like one of our indestructible plants. I mean, it's capable of very tough conditions, and it's also beneficial to hummingbirds. So I think I think the plants are fine, just based on maintenance. So that's where I am. I don't know what to do about the planter. It seems to me that's really difficult. I mean, would you have would the shopping center be taking care of the planter, or is it the store would be taking care of the planter?
No, the store would be maintaining the planter.
So you're gonna have like the manager water the plants every day?
That is correct.
Okay. Anyway, it seems to me very problematic, but I'm willing to approve the project.
Thanks, Alex. I share everybody's comments. I think we'll be able to get this through, maybe to the subcommittee. I have two concerns. I want to be sure staff has that. The bright yellow signage up on top is great, but I don't want to see that lit all night long. So I hope we have a condition in here that the lighting's only on when the store is open or something like that. And secondly, I want to be clear with my colleagues that we're happy with the findings regarding the landscaping. We're approving plants that are not native. We're feeling it's okay. Is the language in the finding we have to everybody's satisfaction? Have we all read that?
The finding allows for maintenance, the conditions, the requirement for the maximum, to the greatest extent feasible to use native plants that can be maintained. And you have like a rooftop planter is usually very harsh conditions. It's a very tough environment for plants because of a large amount of sun and wind and very little soil volume. So that's really a pretty difficult condition for most plants. So I think there are unusual circumstances in this case.
I want to be
also, all of the plants are. I think that if I read the plants list, I mean that they are wildlife beneficial. The ones that they've got. So I think it's approvable.
Okay, I'm fine with the paragraph in finding number 5, but I wanted to be sure everybody else has read that. We're setting a precedent of sorts. And I read it several times and then concluded I think it does hit all the points we need to hit. Okay, with that, I'm going to make a motion that we approve this project subject to 3 items coming back to subcommittee. One, seeing a final plaster sample of the yellow. Secondly, that the applicant look into relocating the motion camera up on the facade. And thirdly, that the corner planter be redesigned to somehow make more viable planting capacity. And I'll look for a second on that.
I'll second that.
Can I make a friendly amendment?
Of course.
Could we also ask for the storefront metal material sample?
Storefront windows, you mean?
Yeah, the mullion color. They mentioned it was a bronze.
Okay, absolutely. Are you implying that you want to see a different color, or you just want to see what the material is?
Just want to see the material.
No problem. Add that to the motion. Any seconds in on that?
Second that too?
Okay, are you in favor of the amendment, the friendly amendment?
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, motion carries 4-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would we like to set a date certain for?
It's an administrative thing you'll work with the staff on.
Okay, thank you so much.
We're happy to help you whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Board.
Moving right along. Next item, study session. Do we have a study session? I don't believe so. Did we receive minutes for this?
The minutes are in the packet now. They're not coming by email.
Okay. Any comments or motions on the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes of July 18th, 2019.
I have some comments on the minutes.
Okay, why don't we hold off on, if we can hold off, Osmo, is that okay for a second?
Or should I retract my motion?
Yes. If you do,
We'll
that
just
makes
wait.
it
No,
easy.
we'll just
Whatever.
wait.
What do you think, Alex?
On the subcommittee item, there are 2 subcommittee items. So item number 6, so that was me and Peter on that subcommittee item, and we approved the brick for the 250 Sherman Avenue. So like a dark colored a custom-made dark colored brick. And we did not approve the pole-mounted plaza lighting. And so that still has to come back to the subcommittee. Item number 7, which is 3000 El Camino. I think it was me and Ozma, and we did approve the sign. It was just a pedestrian wayfinding sign, a very small pedestrian wayfinding sign, or a series of signs. And that was approved.
So for the 3000 El Camino, the very last page of the minutes is the approval memo for the subcommittee. And so any comments on that?
I didn't see that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that looks accurate to me.
Yes, that looks good. Thank you.
So, Jody, on item 6 on the subcommittee, this says that the bollard lighting was approved, and Alex is correct, I think, that we did not approve that.
What are you?
This is item 6.
The public safety building.
Right, but where are you reading?
Yeah, I don't think the minutes say, it just has the
Oh, it
item
just says what we did.
description.
Oh, that's right, there's no answer here. Okay, so,
And we didn't have an approval memo. I mean, I suppose we could have had a sort of interim memo.
Yeah.
But I think Board Member Liu explained what happened,
Yeah.
so that'll go in these minutes.
does that not typically go into minutes, what the decision was on subcommittee stuff? We've been talking about this before.
The subcommittees are not recorded, and so that's why we have at the very end here for the 3000 El Camino, where we did make a decision in the subcommittee, we have this decision memo.
Okay. Any further comments about these minutes?
I have one comment, which is on, this is just a general comment. I think there was a dissenting vote by Board Member Hirsch on one of the projects in there, and I think normally we allow the dissenting vote to comment on the reason why they voted against it, and I didn't see that we actually allowed that to happen. So I think we normally try to do that. So let's just try to do that to make it. I think we normally just try to do that, and the council does that as well. So let's try to do that.
That's a point well made.
So I will move that we.
Well, Ozma was about to make
Okay,
a motion.
I will second it then.
Ozma, your motion still stands?
Sorry, did you second?
I will second.
Okay, so moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? None. Seeing that, the motion carries 4-0. Then, next, I believe final item is, board member questions, comments, and announcements. North of Ventura Coordinated Area Plan. Alex, do you have anything for us?
No, it's been on hold all summer. The next meeting will be next Wednesday here at City Hall in the lobby conference room. And it is going to the City Council on Monday for additional services review.
Thank you. And then our last item is the Architectural Review Board Annual Report to Council. We've all worked on that draft. Do we have a motion to approve that? Well, I will make that motion then, that we accept the Architectural Review Board Annual Report as drafted.
I have a couple comments on the letter.
Oh,
I know we've done that before.
okay. Are we going to be able to get those incorporated into this letter, do you think? Is it?
I think I'm not trying to do anything very difficult. I think I just, under parking for the Stanford Shopping Center, I think it would make sense to mention that there's an existing cap at the shopping center. There's a floor area cap, but the footprint, like the lot coverage, is increasing, and the parking surplus is decreasing down to the minimum amount required. And I think that that's worth trying to I think that's worth mentioning. Because otherwise it doesn't, I think you have to understand that, to make sense of the issue that you're raising here. Because it's partly the uses are changing, right? But I think it's also that the parking is decreasing.
True, fair enough.
Yeah.
What else?
Under pedestrian mobility, the first sentence is, for people to move freely in our commercial districts and along El Camino, we need more seating available to pedestrians. And that doesn't really, I don't really quite understand the connection. Of pedestrians and benches. Unless you sort of explain that we have an aging population that would appreciate the benches, or you were just saying that having like benches and planters makes it more attractive, and it just makes it a more desirable, it's just a more desirable environment.
I believe the idea is to encourage pedestrians, to encourage more walking trips.
And then I think my last comment is under item number F for El Camino. It says, the first sentence is, there is a continuing loss of places to go along El Camino. At least for me, I don't use El Camino I don't use many of the businesses on El Camino, and I'm not sure what loss is being referred to. It seems like most of the hotels replaced other hotels or like car rental agencies. Really, the only thing that I can think of that's been lost is the like the bowling alley. So I don't quite get that. I do agree that there are some of the new mixed-use buildings don't include restaurant use because the parking ratio is the parking requirement is too high. But in this paragraph, I think you're only talking about the hotels, and I think it's also a mixed-use issue. And then, I'm not an expert on hotels, but my very limited understanding is that for hotels, the restaurants are money losers. So only the high-end hotels include restaurants because they've got enough like profit margin to add a restaurant use for the convenience of their guests. But typically they don't do it because of it's too expensive for them to do it. So so whether we include that or not, I don't care, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, I'll confess frustration, Alex. We've been circulating this thing for a month and a half, and now you're coming up, we thought we had the final draft, everybody's commented, and you're bringing up potentially legitimate points, but we really need to get something out. How strongly do you feel that these affect this report as compared to the next one we write in a year? And obviously I want this to be unanimous, it has to be.
Yes, I don't quite understand the rush, but if there's a rush, that's fine.
Does anybody else have anything to add or thoughts about this whole thing? There is no particular rush, I suppose. I just want to get things done.
So I'm actually somewhat glad that Alex brought something up because I also thought I had missed the boat on adding stuff to this letter. But it sort of occurred to me, I think this last project, 788 San Antonio, having it come in front of us, in the letter, we don't really talk about how the architectural character of Palo Alto has evolved because of the projects that we've been reviewing. And I think it might be important to address that in some way, just because a lot of stuff that's coming up in front of us, I don't mean to sound like a downer, but a lot of it is not very well thought out. And I think we're put in a tough position because there's a great desire to bring housing into Palo Alto, and there's a great desire to approve these projects just politically because of their function, but aesthetically, I'm worried Palo Alto is suffering because of the lack of architectural excellence that I think we ought to be enforcing. So I don't know if my board members agree with that, but it's something that I've been struggling with.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that too, and wholeheartedly agree with you on that. I found it ought to be the emphasis of the lead-in paragraph somehow on what we do, and it was not a part of this particular letter in deference to the fact that it was kind of thrown together at the very end of this last period. I think it's lacking, but I would like to see us move on and next year's letter be better. And I think that we should keep track of how we're progressing with just exactly those attitudes of improving the quality of architecture in this city. We somehow seem to get bound up in a lot of detail all the time, and not to have the overview that we ought to be having on some of these projects relative to the aesthetics.
Okay, it looks like we're going to do some more writing. Alex, can you respond, though, to the question? I wrote down lack of architectural excellence. I think, Osma, you're right that many applications we receive are not as good as we want them to be. But I think also that we have to be practical with what we're doing here. We're not designing these buildings. We're reviewing them for compliance, and we're not hiring the architects, and we're not the clients. But Alex, you've been through this for the longest. What do you think?
I've been on the board too long. Can I say, in the last time that I looked at a list of the projects that the boards had reviewed, I think I counted like 15 architectural awards. The time that say like 2 times ago, there were only 2. So in my mind, the board has been doing a good job. I think the developers understand that the city wants better projects. The council had asked for it, and they put in the beauty pageant provision. The developers didn't want to participate in the beauty pageant, but they did make the buildings better. We do have, I think generally, overall, I think we do have a better quality of architecture firms working on projects. So I alluded to that. I think we're better. There's still room for improvement, but the way I look at it, it's like we're like far better off than we were like 10 years ago. So if you're still not happy, I think that's fine. I'm thinking that it's an internal thing that we need to do. I'm not sure that it's something that needs to go to the council. Like, if say we bring it up to the council, right? What do you want? Do we want more urban designer? We want like a urban designer to critique the projects? Do we want a 7-person board? You know, like where are you going with the issue?
May I respond? Oh.
Yeah.
Sure, Osma, what do you think?
I think it's really more just like an attitude and a stance that, and I think you're right that it is getting better for sure. Sometimes the first iterations versus the last iterations show great improvement, and I think the council is all about having a good stance. But I think a lot of the stance at the moment is sort of piecemeal. We end up focusing a lot on the landscape because we want the landscape to be great. And there's kind of no stance about like having a strong, like there's of course like high finished materials, those things that are in our findings are all true and we should keep those. But I guess I'm kind of looking for the council to make a stance like we don't just want a building that could be anywhere. We want a building that's like really specific to Palo Alto that actually has like a high level of like architectural excellence so that, because in the future, all these things are going to change. And I think also like taking a trip across the pond where these buildings have been around forever, but they're sort of, the way that they're constructed has this really strong relationship to the street, and they have a really important relationship with texture, character. The human relationship to the wall is really well thought out. And over here, I'm seeing a lot of trends with the stuff that we've been seeing, and it's less about the pedestrian experience, and it's less about like the detail and the articulation of the facade, and it's more about FAR, and it's more about these numbers that don't actually mean, they don't actually mean anything about my relationship to the building when I'm standing in front of it. So I don't know, I think I would just like the council to have a really strong stance that we're not just looking for anything, we're looking for something really, really special everywhere. So I don't know that our applicants have sort of come to us with that attitude.
I think I would argue that our findings and the comp plan speak to your issue about design excellence, and then it's just on the board to enforce it. Like, are we at, I guess my point is, like, say if you want to throw this to the council, and they're going to say, well, here are the findings. Do you want us to change the findings or the code? Or are we just saying we need to enforce, the ARB needs to enforce what's already in our comp plan and codes?
Yeah, I mean, it's a report, right? It's like, this is what we've seen, and what we've noticed is that, you know, this is something that we struggle with.
I would support that.
So Ozma, maybe there's a bit of history behind this, but they changed these findings just maybe 4 years ago now, 3 years ago, went from 15 of them down to 6. And there was quite a bit of debate about exactly what you're bringing up. And I think the findings have been an improvement. They've allowed us to focus more on what you're talking about. They were, I think, a clear expression by the council, things like high quality design and materials. It's a fairly strong statement to give us that much latitude. So what Alex is saying, I believe, is correct, that the council's put it on us to make that happen. They want it to happen. And I think putting in a letter to council then saying that we need to get better quality architects and design is sort of, they're going to look back to us and say, yeah, that's right, do it. And what I think this letter needs to be is something a little bit more just focused on. Here's a couple of things that we've noticed as trends through all these projects we've looked at that you may want to consider. And I think the more that we can keep it focused and crystal clear down to 1 or 2 pages, a series of bullet points, the bigger chance we have of them paying attention to it. So as much as I agree, I'd love to get higher quality architecture here. I don't see how they can really do anything on that except tell us they already did something about it.
But do you agree that we should have a paragraph just explaining in the last year, this is sort of the kind of aesthetics that we've been encountering?
I'd like to speak a little bit to this. You know, Cambridge Street project, you know, I thought went through transitions, design transitions that were excellent. I wasn't around at the beginning, but in the end, we approved that commercial project, and it had, it's a terrific, simple street front. The materials were well thought out. I mean, I think something like that should be explained somehow in this letter. This is what we do. You know, this is what we want to do. And we were successful at doing it in that particular instance. So crow a little bit about what we are rather than complain.
Yeah, so as I'm trying to avoid making this a selling point for us either way, I've thought there's plenty of opportunities and things we should be doing to explain to the council and the community what the Architecture Review Board does. I don't think that's the place for an annual report to the council.
But it's not in that letter. It's, you know, this is what our purpose is, and this is what we should say is our purpose in the first paragraph somehow. Look, I think we could approve the letter and move on to next year.
Yeah, we can put it in next year's letter.
Alex brought it up. I mean, my opinion is his comment about the surplus parking at the shopping center is quite legitimate and could easily be fit in. I think the comment Jody brought up about clarifying why pedestrian mobility is enhanced by having benches could be rephrased. I frankly disagree that El Camino has suffered a loss of places to go. Almost every project removes an Olive Garden restaurant or a sandwich shop above the buildings or a sneaker store. I mean, it goes on and on. Each one of these removes some local retail institution. But we can go on and on about that. It's kind of vague. So yeah, I'd love to see us just pass this and go on to next year, but if we want to redo it, we should do that too. Do we? I heard you say, David, you're okay passing it?
I'm okay passing it.
Alex?
Yes, I'm okay with this.
Ozma?
Sure.
Okay, so
We're all very excited about the letter.
my hope is that each outgoing chairperson will take the effort to make sure we get a report out to council. I've asked staff to make it so I or one member of our board can present this to the council in public, read it out to them, and then we just go on with it from there. And I'd like to be clear again, this is not an opportunity, I think, for us to crow or say what we do good or bad, but rather this is what we've noticed on projects that are trends, that are emerging patterns, that are things we think you should be aware of. And this is required by statute that we report back to them. In any case, thank you all.
It's actually just in our bylaws.
You're right, it's just in our bylaws.
So do we have a motion, do we have a second?
Do we
I thought I saw board member Hirsch second. Did you not second?
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the motion passes 4-0. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.